Hello and welcome to today's video. Today we're in an Austrian Airlines Airbus A320-214. We're performing flight Austrian 725 from Vienna to Tivat in Montenegro. Tivat is a challenging approach because you've got terrain either side of the airport, and the localizer, or the lateral guidance into the runway, is actually offset by 20 degrees to the runway heading. The approach today is the Localizer Zulu for runway 32. However, there's actually no Glideslope available, but the Airbus creates one. And it's not an actual Glideslope that comes from a ground transmitter. But instead, it is just automatically created by the aircraft so that we get vertical guidance into the runway. Now, for Tivat, that means a 3.21 degree glide slope, which is steeper than usual, but it's perfectly manageable. The runway in Tivat is 8,208 feet long. Luckily the weather is good today, and the winds are light and variable. The exact approach that we're doing today is that we're flying over the Tivat NDB, and we're flying out to a waypoint Memel before turning in for the last D1 hotel, standard arrival procedure, and then we'll start on the localizer. At Memel here, we have a speed restriction of 250 knots. Here I was descending a little bit too quickly for what I like, so I changed from an open descent to one guided by the vertical speed, and I selected 1400 feet per minute downwards. Here I'm turning on the terrain radars, just because, as you'll see after we complete this turn, there is a lot of terrain around the airport that gets to quite the height. 5,899 feet above sea level, in fact, is the highest point. And given that the airport elevation is not very high above sea level, that is quite a big mountain. Today we're doing a flaps full approach, and we'll have medium auto brake. We can see already that we've got lock star engaged, so that means we're going to be lining up the localizer now, as opposed to following the green flight path that has been set out for us on our navigation display. So we will be right of that line for a little bit. Now our aircraft is just turning to the left, so that we can line up with the localizer better. So now we've captured the localizer, and we're at 4,000 feet, waiting to catch this glide slope that the Airbus has kindly created for us. You can see in the bottom left of the primary flight display that we're about 20 nautical miles until the runway threshold. As I said before, the localizer is offset by 20 degrees. So that means we're going to have to do a left turn once we get closer to the runway. But we're going to be doing it in a bit of a wiggle fashion. We're going to turn right slightly, and then we're going to turn left. On the navigation display, you can see the blue arrow coming up. It's about 4 nautical miles away from our aircraft now, and that's when we'll start descending. At this point, I decided to lower flaps 1, so our speed will come down to the green S there, which is 186 knots. So now we've got Glideslope star. Our thrust is reducing, and I decided to lower flaps 2 at this point. For this approach, I wanted the aircraft to be fully set up with flaps full and gear down and in landing configuration longer before than if we had a straight-in approach. This is just due to the difficulty of having to set up the aircraft while maneuvering around. The decision altitude for going around is actually 1,370 feet above sea level. So that's quite the high decision altitude, just due to the fact that the localizer is offset. Here you can see on the right, that's the mountains that goes to the highest elevation of 5,900 feet. As we pass through 150 knots there, I get the gear down, and we'll also turn on the lights on the gear as well.
2,500.
The radio altimeter comes alive soon after, and we get our flaps to full. Now we're fully configured, we're on the glide path for the runway, and we're at a good speed, so this is now a stable approach. And we have plenty of time to decide whether we want to go around or not. The point of being fully configured earlier than we would normally be is just because we want to have time to decide about whether we want to go around or not, because this is a challenging approach, and we don't want to be caught in a position where we are not in a configuration where we want to be and we are unable to land. Not to mention the fact that the glide slope of being steeper than usual does make it harder for us to lose energy and slow down. So being configured early on is a benefit. You can see the wind shifting around in direction and speed a little bit, but it's not a huge amount.
100 above. Minimum.
There we've done a little bit of a right turn, and then we'll turn left in so that we line up with the runway.
1000.
Now we do our left turn to line up with the runway. We've got 2 reds and 2 whites on the poppy lights, so our height is looking good. And now I'll just leave you to watch our landing.
$400. 300. 200. 100. 50. 40. 30.
Low, terrain.
20. Retard.
You can see that on final there we did drop a little bit lower than necessary, and we got fairly close to the lights at the runway threshold, but nothing that would be reported as an incident, thankfully. But overall we touched down right on the markers and just a bit right of centerline, and fairly smoothly as well. So I'm pretty happy with that landing, especially given the challenging approach. And thank you for joining me for this fun approach into Tivat today. And hopefully I'll see you guys in another video again soon. Thanks for watching.